Hello! So I've talked quite a lot in my videos about the book, The Hobbit, by J.R.R. Tolkien. Possibly my favourite book of all time. Definitely my favourite book of all time. Like, no doubt. But recently the film was adapted into 3 movies. And I thought I would talk a little bit about the movies as an adaptation of Tolkien's novel. Now, I quite like the Hobbit movies. No, you don't! Are you trying to do a Gollum impression? No, I'm just part of you that was disappointed with the Hobbit movies. I was outraged that they were not as good as they could be. Sure, that's right, they're not as good as they could be. But, I mean, you could say that for anything. But Peter Jackson did such a good job with the Lord of the Rings movies, how did he get this wrong? Well, I think there's a range of issues which plagued the Hobbit production. One criticism which came up a lot was the fact that it was split into 3 movies. Which is ridiculous, 3 movies to make 1 book when Lord of the Rings was 3 books and 3 movies. I'll agree that rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way, including you. You were expecting 2 movies and then you got 3, and you were very annoyed. That being said, I was also excited that there were 3, because that was 3 times more the Tolkien. Now, originally it was going to be 2 movies, An Unexpected Journey and There and Back Again. Which makes a lot of sense, I would have agreed with that. But what they wanted to put in it couldn't fit into 2 movies, so they had to make 3. But then they didn't have enough stuff for 3, so they ended up padding the second one and the third one out of it. The movies were like 9 hours long. How did they not have enough stuff? How did they have to put more stuff in? They could have made 3 2-hour movies instead of 3 3-hour movies. I'll agree with that, they could have made all the movies shorter. I think the problem with Peter Jackson at the helm of this is he's such a big Tolkien fan. He doesn't want to throw anything out necessarily, but he wants to put in a lot more that Tolkien didn't. He wants to explore the world, and I would have done that if I was directing the film. Lots of Tolkien fans would have done that if they wanted to make the film. They would have padded it out, because this is his chance to build on a world which he created visually for a generation of people. The Lord of the Rings was so different and unique in the way that it projected fantasy and Tolkien in particular. If you were visiting that world again 10 years later, you'd want to expand, you'd want to explore the world which you had helped to create. But as a director, he should also know how to make a good movie. That's true, and his desires as a fan and as a writer, I think, would probably have conflicted with his ideas as a director. That being said, he was under so much pressure with these movies that I think I can forgive him for blurring the lines a bit. Let's not forget that during The Lord of the Rings, he was part of the production team and the writing team, and it worked out well then. In many ways, he was following a formula which had worked before and tweaking it slightly. Unfortunately, lightning always doesn't strike the same place twice. But you've got to give him credit that he tried, given the production problems. Every film has production problems. You can't just say that the film was bad because there were production problems. Well, the films were originally going to be directed by Guillermo del Toro, but he left after 1 or 2 years of production, again due to production difficulties, problems with the studio, etc. Well, Peter Jackson was originally just one of the writers for the film, and Peter Jackson has said that instead of taking extra time to take away Guillermo del Toro stuff and put his stuff back in, he just went along with the schedule they were already on. Which was okay during production of the first film because everything was sorted, but stuff for the second film wasn't ready, which meant he was continually playing catch-up. Which means when they got to the second film, they had too much stuff to put in it, so they had to make it into 3, and when they got to the third film, he was still playing catch-up with the second, and there wasn't enough time to focus on the third. And I think a lot of people agree that the third film was the weakest. I think that's true. It's mostly one big battle, and you don't see much of the battle, and everything just seems a bit higgledy-piggledy. And I think that's probably due to the production issues. I saw a video recently where Peter Jackson was saying he didn't know what he was filming, re The Battle of 5 Armies, the day he was meant to be filming it. And I think that's a very hard situation to be in, and if you halt production for too long, then the studio will get on your back for wasting money. And I think a lot of it was Peter Jackson having to create something, and even if he wasn't 100% happy with it, at least it was a finished product. But parts of it weren't finished. The CGI in some of the scenes was terrible. Yeah, but what film doesn't have bad CGI? In every film that has some sort of CGI these days, you can always pick out one scene which is weaker compared to the others, where they definitely green screened or they haven't been rendered properly. And considering the amount of CGI in The Hobbit, some of it is guaranteed to be worse off than other parts. Even if you look back at Lord of the Rings, the CGI was incredible for most of it, but there's the occasional scene where you're like, oh, that doesn't look right. That's a universal thing, and I can see your argument that he should have gotten that right, considering the amount of CGI in Lord of the Rings, his preparation, but again, they had to rush a lot of the production, including the editing, including the CGI. But what about the extra stuff? What about the love scene between the dwarf and the elf? That was rubbish. I'll agree that was very obvious filler. Obvious filler? It was terrible. It was just forced in there. The only reason it was put in there was to make the death of Keeley more poignant and more emotional for the audience. And I'll agree that's a cheap trick. But it wasn't even done very well. It didn't seem genuine. I'll agree there's a good scene where they're in the prison cells and they're talking about the stars, but I'd say that's mostly down to the tunage of Howard Shore, who, by the way, did a fantastic score, but not nearly as good as Lord of the Rings. The best bits of the score was when they drew in Lord of the Rings motifs. Although the score did rely heavily on returning motifs from Lord of the Rings, I'd say that the newer scores were also good. I don't think they were as iconic, but they were still really nice. The Dwarven Lonely Mountain motif was really nice. I think that love theme was very good. I think it's very hard because the returning motifs are always going to be more emotive because you know them and they're familiar. And I think the newer motifs feel like they're intruding on a soundtrack that you know and love. One thing you have to give them credit for is the Riddles in the Dark sequence, which is in the first film when Bilbo encounters Gollum and the ring. No matter how much the rest of the book was altered, you have to admit that that scene was really close to the book. Gollum was terrifying, and the interaction between him and Bilbo was electric. Like, that's my favourite scene out of the whole trilogy. Possibly because it's my favourite scene in the book, but I appreciated how well that was done. Also, on the whole, you have to admit how well the film series built into The Lord of the Rings. Not only with the style, but also in the writing, in the way that they're hinting at things, like the necromancer, which didn't really need to be shown. You could have taken that out and just mentioned it in passing. But that's the problem. In the book it is mentioned in passing, and I always thought that was a really incredible, wonderful part of the book, which we never got to see. Gandalf was just like, oh, I'm sorry, I was getting rid of that necromancer with the White Council. It was an epic battle, but we don't need to go into that right now. It was so Shakespearean in the way that the action was taking place off screen, and I really enjoyed the fact that we could view it in the film. Even though it does mess up some of the continuity of Lord of the Rings, it was a very good connection. But other connections to the Lord of the Rings were terrible, like Legolas. I can see why Legolas was put into the film. And even though he's not mentioned in The Hobbit, he would have been around then, he just wasn't written in as a character. I think some mention of him should have been put in, whether it was, oh, he's somewhere else, or, oh, there's him leading some soldiers, that's enough. But he was featured a little too heavily. What was up with his eyes and the way he was running across a crumbling tower? Like, that's not how physics works, even for elves. Okay, I know, I'll give you that one. That was terrible. That broke Tolkien reality for me. Again, I can see why he put it in. In theory, it's a good shot, and much has been said in Tolkien's work about the lightness of elves and their agility, but it was, no, bad Peter Jackson. Another thing is that in these mammoth-sized films, some of the scenes really drag, like the dwarves singing, Bard and his children, and all the flashbacks. Oh, come on, I like the dwarf singing. That was really fun. As for scenes that were slow and dragging, I mean, if it had been action all the way through, it would have been a bit tiring. That's just a basic thing of filmmaking. Even action films have to slow down from time to time so the audience can catch its breath. The whole thing about Bard, again, they've sort of thrown a lot in there, but it does round him out as a character. Some of the stuff with Bard and the people of Lake Town was heavy-handed, but other parts of it were kind of necessary if you have these characters. It gives them motivation and it gives them humanity. That's necessary. Talking about humanity, I've got to say something about this film and the non-human villains which display humanity. The Lord of the Rings villains are very human apart from Sauron. Saruman, in a way, Denethor, Gollum, all very humanoid, whereas in this film we had the Goblin King and Azog, which are kind of human, but we've also got a dragon. And you've got to say, Smaug was really well done. But Smaug went out like a bitch. He was meant to be really awesome, and then just like, oh, arrow dead, which is what happens in the book. The only difference is Smaug is made to look amazing before he's killed. In the book, he flies off, burns Lake Town, and dies. Whereas in the film, we get to see him actually like tearing the mountain apart, trying to find the dwarves. And on that note, I think it was a really good sequence where they try and kill Smaug, because it gives the dwarves, and particularly Thorin, a moment of heroism which they don't get in the books. Like, they don't get a payoff in terms of their journey with Smaug, because he's killed by someone else, and they just sneak in and take the place. Whereas in the film, they earned it, and I think that adds something to their characters, especially Thorin's, because he's got the conflicting emotions and the jealousy and the greed, and that has to be balanced out for him to be a hero. If you took out all the good stuff he did towards the end of the second film, he'd kind of be an asshole. All that being said, I have one major problem with The Hobbit. The biggest, most treacherous, horrible thing Peter Jackson has ever done. The way that the Hobbit movie began should have been the way that the book begins. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell. Not yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. Peter Jackson, you did not use the opening paragraph of The Hobbit in your narration at the beginning of the Hobbit movies. That is unforgivable. That's just my opinion. Overall, I think it was really good, and I was disappointed. But considering the production problems and what they were working with, I thought it was really, really good. Anyway, guys, I'm really interested to know your thoughts. If you liked the Hobbit films, if you didn't like them, please comment below, tell me your thoughts. I'd love to talk to people about this. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of this kind of thing, then thumbs up, or let me know, subscribe, and thanks very much for watching.